Hello friends, for today's video we're going to be going through some releases and headlines for the month of July. As always, there'll be timestamps in case you'd like to skip ahead to any one specific section. We'll kick things off with the releases for the month within fantasy and speculative fiction, then we'll get into some of the news and announcements, and at the end we'll do our shoutouts, one for an artist, one for an underhyped book, and one for a good cause. I will say, there were so many announcements for video games recently, so this is going to be broken up into a few different days worth of filming to make sure that I actually can cover all of the things, or at least as many of the things as possible that I'm interested in, and I think a lot of you are going to be interested in as well. I know not all of you aren't interested in video games though, so we'll of course be talking about some book news as well, or just things pertaining to storytelling. But all that said, let's go ahead and officially get into some of our releases. Kicking things off, we have Fabulous Bodies. This is by Chuck Tingle, and it says it is a horror novel about Poppy Stringer, a fashion influencer and part-time grave robber in Palm Springs who gets a lucrative job to retrieve the body of a dead rock star, Eddie Michaels, only for him to reanimate, leading to a bloody supernatural adventure. From there, we have The Sea Hides Its Dead. It follows a group of academics trapped in an underwater cave studying an ancient cult. Definitely sounds very different, and also like it has the potential to be very creepy and extremely atmospheric. After that, we have The Eye of the Leviathan. When this was announced, I had brought it up before, so some of you might have seen this and had it on your radar. And if you are familiar with Mask of Mirrors, this is by the same author duo. This one is the first book in the Sea Beyond series. It's a historical fantasy set in an alternate Spanish golden age where fae and humans clash over resources from the other world. I don't know if I too often see things to do with Spain and fae, so I think that'll be a really interesting approach to that. After that, we have The Winter Folk. This one is an upcoming Appalachian Gothic horror novel about a woman named Moth who returns to a mysterious magical lodge in the woods where she once worked for an enigmatic Mr. Oslin, facing dangerous rules and haunting memories from her past. Our next one by H.G. Perry, which I've read a couple of H.G. Perry books. I've liked the books by H.G. Perry I've checked out. This one is called The Witch Below the Dreaming Wood. It's a historical fantasy novel. If you don't know anything about H.G. Perry's works, that's kind of their bread and butter. But it's a historical fantasy novel set in Wales during World War II, where widespread dreams of King Arthur signal a magical resurgence, following a British Museum librarian who dreams of the Lady of the Lake and must confront the darkness of Camelot's end as legends bleed into reality. After that, we have a new Elizabeth Lim work. I believe this is Elizabeth Lim's adult debut. It sounds like it is very, very impactful and quite heavy, which is a little bit different from what I typically see from Elizabeth Lim, so I'm very excited to see how she explores this side of storytelling. But it says it's a multi-generational adult fantasy novel about a mother and daughter navigating a family curse tied to a magical fishbone bracelet set against the backdrop of war, immigration, and family secrets in 1940s Hong Kong and 1980s San Francisco. It looks like one of the characters has escaped from soldiers by turning invisible, so that's kind of where it seems like the magic is tied in, but it does seem like it's a combination of historical fiction and fantasy. We also have a new installment in Sarah Beth Durst's Cozy Fantasy series. I quite liked the first book in this. The second one was extra cozy, which actually didn't quite work for me, but I know a lot of people still really enjoyed it. So I'm kind of curious to see where we land with this new one. It's called Sea of Charms. It follows Marin, a supply runner on the high seas with a sea serpent and a sentient shrub as her crew, who finds herself in a fake boyfriend to real romance situation with a musician she rescues during a revolution in the capital city of Elysium. We also have Harbor of Hungry Ghosts. This is once again another historical fantasy novel set in specifically the Opium War era Hong Kong, following a young woman from a family of demon hunters who must confront new hybrid monsters created when British folklore clashes with Chinese mythology after a ritual is disrupted by colonists. The setup for that one sounds really fascinating. A lot of these don't necessarily feel like traditional sword and sorcery style of fantasy, and even though I am a sucker for that, I also get really excited about some of these types of fantasy books because, one, I think fantasy can just do so much, and I like that some of the restrictions that are kind of forced upon different genres. I like when those fade away and we kind of bleed into other genres, which feels like a lot of the books coming out in July are doing that. And it just creates for so many opportunities to be surprised, to find things that are a little bit different from the norm. And it's great currently because I feel like we've been a little bit stuck in a very trendy and tropey time for the genre, and I like that we're breaking out and we're trying new things. Or I should say, I think a lot of authors have been doing that for a long time. It's nice to see that publishing is willing to lend their resources to a lot of these voices. For the headlines and announcements, we'll go ahead and kick things off with adaptation news. We'll then segue into new editions, new books, and also cover reveals, and then we'll finally get into the video game news. As noted, kicking things off with adaptation news. First off, we have a TV show that is going to be coming out for The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow, and I'm very intrigued by the fact that they decided to make this a TV show. Sometimes there are some high and epic fantasy works that end up being made into movies, and I think a lot of us are always a little on the fence when we hear that news because we think, well, I don't think a movie is enough. Why wouldn't they make it a show? And in this book's case, it's a standalone, so it's kind of curious that something that is much shorter in length, and if you haven't read this story, there is a repetitive nature to it that is purposely baked in as part of the commentary and also part of the themes. I won't reveal too much in case you haven't checked it out, but because of that, I'm surprised they're going the show route, because of if there's any fantasy work that I could see working as a film, because I almost always would advocate for them to be TV shows just so you can flesh out the magic and the world and the characters and all the things that get put into fantasy stories. But while I typically advocate for shows, this one I could have seen working as a film. I'm not disappointed that it's going to be a show, though. I like that we have this opportunity to allow the story to breathe and allow the character moments to shine, and for the people that are watching to get invested in what's happening and to watch the slight changes over the course of the story. So I'm very curious about this. I'm not really sure how it's going to work, but I'm excited about this one. I think that there's a good chance it could do well as a TV show. The only other thing I'll say is that part of what made this book really work for me was the writing, and obviously you lose that a little bit by having it as an adaptation, just in the very nature, of course, of something being adapted, and sometimes that's not as big of a deal, and then in other stories it is a little bit more of a big deal. And so because the writing was such a highlight, I'm curious how they're going to try to use the medium of television to bring their own writing chops to the table, you could say, because you can't convey things through narrative. You're going to have to do it through visuals and voice acting and the dialogue, and I'm just curious how they're going to approach all of that. Anyway, some other adaptation news. I won't go on and on and on about the rest of these, but Lady Macbeth as well as the Shatter Me series are both going to be adapted. For Lady Macbeth, it is likely going to be a movie, and then same thing with the Shatter Me series. They will likely be multiple films, and that one is going to be done by Warner Brothers. We also finally have an update on the Stormlight Archive television show that's coming to Apple, which is that the first season is going to be made up of 10 episodes. We don't know much else beyond that. We don't know how long the episodes are going to be. We don't know how much of the story those 10 episodes are going to get through, but Sanderson has confirmed that he is going to be writing on those 10 episodes, so at the very least, it's going to have author approval. This next one, I'm kind of stretching the definition of adaptation, but technically they are adapting something. It's just not a book. They're adapting a video game, and that would be Elden Ring. A24 has announced a partnership with Google's AI. Many people are not only very upset by this, given how this company has developed its trust in its audience and what they have prided themselves on in the past, which is being advocates for artistic visions and being really supportive of smaller filmmakers and just taking chances on interesting ideas. To see them go in the direction of utilizing AI is a disappointment for a lot of people, very understandably. And additionally, since they announced this and they received a lot of backlash, they have doubled down on this. That's not the response I think most people were hoping for, and I think the part that is especially irritating, beyond the obvious, a lot of people who appreciate art do not appreciate AI, so beyond that, it's the way they presented it as if their audience is stupid, and they did this by saying, well, our whole goal isn't trying to make things cheaper and faster. Our goal is to use this for things like storyboards. And if you know anything about the creative process, that's such a slap in the face to so many people who are film fans, to think that we aren't aware of, yes, indeed, that still fits into, one, making things cheaper and faster, and two, you're really eliminating the opportunity for artistic vision. Ugh, it's just very frustrating. I did a whole video dedicated to this topic if you're interested in hearing more about this unfortunate news. So I'll have that linked. I don't need to go on and on about it. I'll just move on. Let's move on to something happy. Happy for me anyway. I don't know if it's the case for all of you. Witch Hat Atelier Season 2 officially is in the works. It has been announced by the actual studio because previously it was leaked, and when that happens you don't know for sure, you don't have official confirmation, so it has officially been announced. At the time that I'm filming this, we don't have basically any other details, but I'm really hopeful that they're going to announce more details very soon. Oh man, I hope it's coming soon. You have heard me go on over and over and over again about Witch Hat, so I'll move on from there. A lot of you will be happy to hear that Peacock is planning to do an adaptation for Dungeon Crawler Carl. I think Peacock's an interesting choice. Now, I haven't read this yet, and many of you know that it is on my TBR for this year, and I do plan to read it. But despite not actually having knowledge of it from reading it, it's one of those stories that you kind of can't help but pull some information about it through the fantasy zeitgeist. And everything I've heard about it, Peacock seems like an odd choice to me. And I know it's not incredibly edgy like The Boys or something like that. It's not this like grotesque, disgusting show that's hyper violent necessarily. So maybe it'll work. And those of you who have read it can certainly speak with more informed opinions than I can about this. I just think that's a strange group to be the ones to adapt it. But maybe I'll be very, very incorrect about that. And then last, for those of you who are fans of romance, Off Campus Season 2 is in the works as well. Moving now to our editions, new books, and cover reveals. The first thing I wanted to mention, because this is happening, if this goes up the day I'm planning for it to go up, then this will be relevant to all of you tomorrow, July 7th. So the news is that LitJoy Crate is doing a reprint of Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. I actually have this duology by them. It's beautiful. I think their editions in general are really, really well put together. They tend to have really great art. I like that a lot of their editions end up being printed right onto the books themselves, which is great. And then they often have illustrations through the book. Some of their editions have annotations by the author. So they do a really fantastic job. And I think that they're pretty reasonably priced given everything that you are getting with their books. So if you are interested in this reprint, again, July 7th is when the news should be going out for that. Acrylopix also has a new edition coming out specifically for Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. I think that this one looks very beautiful, and I think it's quite fitting not only to the general feel of a lot of V.E. Schwab's books, but also this book in particular. I think that the art direction they went in was a good choice. From there, we actually have two different Valdemar editions happening. So one of them is through Backer Kit. This one looks absolutely stunning, and it already has over 4,000 supporters. If you want to join that, I'll have the information for it linked. I'm like, I want to get it. It's so beautiful. But also the problem is that there are many beautiful editions of many wonderful books. Shaw has announced that they will be releasing a bind-up of some of the Valdemar books in November. We talked about the Everlasting in the adaptations section, but also bringing it up again in this section. So Illumicrate had a special edition of this. It sold out basically immediately to a point where they couldn't do a general sale, but they have announced that they will be doing a reprint of this. I believe the reprints will not be signed, but the artwork and the editions themselves will be the same. So if you're interested in that, Illumicrate will definitely be having a reprint, and you can try to get your edition then. We have a couple of announcements from Broken Binding as well. So first we have a fantasy pick of theirs, which is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, as well as Piranesi. The art for these, I think, was absolutely perfect. The artist is able to utilize more muted colors. It's just very, very subtle, and very intentional, and because of the more muted nature of it, it kind of brings in this sort of sinister feel to it as well, which I think is very fitting of both of these books. So those I think are going to be gorgeous. Can't wait to see the physical copies of them. And then the sci-fi pick has been announced, which would be the Protectorate series. Also, will say the art for book 3 has not been shown just yet, and it's my favorite of the series. So get ready, because when they show that, it's gonna be great. But I have mentioned that I thought that this trilogy, which I read not so long ago, I thought that this trilogy was so much fun. And I think a lot of people who are in the mood for kind of that space opera, action adventure, sci-fi story are going to not only enjoy this story, but I think that these editions have some really, really wonderful art on them. Next up, we have that the Lycanius trilogy is getting a new set. So if you're a fan of this trilogy, then be on the lookout for those. And then we also have a new edition of Perdido Street Station, specifically by Conversation Tree Press. I remember seeing some of the artwork for it, and then just now getting to see so many more of the specs. I think that they knocked it out of the park. It's gorgeous. It's got that creepy, dark feel to it, which is very, very accurate for Perdido Street Station. I think they did a phenomenal job. And then from there, we have a few cover reveals. So first off, we have finally the cover reveal for the new John Gwynne book. I know a lot of people have been getting John Gwynne editions coming in as well, so it feels like John Gwynne is just kind of really prevalent right now. But I really like this new cover. It makes me very excited for this story, and I think this is slightly outside of what he typically writes within, because I think a lot of his stuff tends to be more Nordic, and this one I believe is more Eastern European, and I'm curious about the book itself just in general. We also have Margaret Rogerson has announced a new book, which is Night Eternal. It's been so long since we've gotten a new Margaret Rogerson story. She writes books that just have such a kind of classic, whimsical, fun, adventurous feel to them. I'm hopeful for Night Eternal, and I'm glad to see Margaret Rogerson is kind of back to doing more books. And then last for this, we have a new M.L. Wong book, and this one would be Destiny's Edge. Currently, it's already available to her newsletter subscribers, and the physical editions will be coming out in the future. I know most of you know this author. If you don't recognize the author's name, I'm sure you recognize the name of the books, which would be Sword of Kaigen as well as Blood Over Bright Haven. So I have yet to read something by this author I haven't liked, so I'm very excited about Destiny's Edge. Kind of came out of nowhere, and I'm really looking forward to it. I hope to enjoy this one as much as I've enjoyed the previous two. For video game news, we'll probably be going through a lot of these by looking at their trailers, but one thing I wanted to note really quick that is unfortunate news, I try to stick to stuff that's exciting, but similar to the A24 AI decision, this is also not my favorite. So Sony has recently announced that as of 2028, they plan to no longer have physical copies of games. I think a lot of people have found this to be some pretty bad writing on the wall in regard to the fact that it seems as though a lot of companies are trying to go in the direction of no longer allowing people to own things. So we've seen this with books, we've seen this with audiobooks, we've seen this with movies, and now it seems like video games are the newest thing on the chopping block. I hope they change their mind. I doubt they will. But it does feel like they're not only going in a direction where they're going to be able to dictate a little bit more, but it also then lends itself to forcing people to always have subscriptions also, which is not what everybody wants. And I think this is very bad for physical locations that sell video games, buy, sell trade groups, places like GameStop. I still love going to GameStop. I still love going to stores like I've talked about the local bookstore I love in Arizona called Bookman's. And Bookman's, of course, as the name implies, sells a lot of books, but they sell a little bit of everything, including consoles and video games. And it just kind of seems like a way to narrow the community as well. And a lot of people that have made this community what it is, on top of what I already noted, which is that it seems like we're going in a direction where nobody's ever going to be able to own anything. So I'm not happy about this. I will say I have preferred Sony over some of Xbox's decisions, Microsoft. I think Microsoft has made a lot of bad decisions over the years, and it just runs like garbage in comparison to PlayStation. It's unbelievable. Sorry. My frustration with Xbox is coming out. But it's disappointing. This is disappointing news from them. So I wanted to get that out of the way and then move on to some exciting video game news that we've gotten over the last few weeks. Starting with the lesser known of the games I'll be mentioning, we have Nova Flare's Project Rabbit. It's described as a reimagining of Alice in Wonderland, but as an East meets West dark fantasy enriched by a proven IP, and it says it builds a unique universe for global audiences. It looks quite a bit like Liza P, which has me really excited, but currently there has not been an announcement for a console release. From there, we have an update on Wolf Among Us 2, and I have been waiting for quite a while for an update on this, as it's been in and out of the works, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I do hope progress will be made here, though. From there, we have Stellar Blade Blood Rain. The first Stellar Blade was nothing to write home about in regards to its story, but its combat was incredibly addictive and became quite challenging toward the end. I'm on the fence though on whether I want to give this next one a shot, as some of the other elements are either lacking or I actually just dislike, and I would prefer if they put a little more effort into improving the all-around look and experience, but I'll be keeping my eye on this one. Now on to our remakes. First up, we have the third installment of Final Fantasy VII's remake titled Revelation. The second game really explained why they felt the need to break the game up as they did, because originally it was only one game, and now with the remake they've broken it up into 3. So I'll be curious to see with this third installment everything that gets poured into it. From there, it feels like our childhoods are fully returning as we are getting a new Spyro and a remake of Ocarina of Time. For those of you who are gamers, which of these games did you play more as a kid, or were you someone who got to play both? I was a PlayStation player, so it was Spyro all the way for me, but I am really excited for all of the Zelda fans to be getting this remake, especially as I know a lot of people have been waiting for this announcement, some of them for years. And then last, of course, we have the new God of War. This time we are following Kratos' wife. The general setup is that in order for her to save the ones she loves, she must fight through the afterlife where ruthless gods from across mythology vie for power in a land overflowing with dangerous magic. Closing everything out now with our shoutouts, a reminder that we shout out artists, underhyped books or series, as well as a good cause. So I'll go ahead and start with the good cause. And even though I've mentioned World Central Kitchen before, I wanted to bring them up again because of the fact that there have been devastating earthquakes in Venezuela, and World Central Kitchen is doing a lot to help people affected by those earthquakes. Not only are they doing a lot, but I recently shared over on my Instagram, and I'll mention it here as well, there was this group that collected a lot of different organizations that are actually on the ground in Venezuela. So I'll share that, and I'll share those organizations as well in case you'd like to donate to multiple ones. And then now, moving on to something that is a little bit lighter than that, we have our artists and our series. Because officially we have announced the Protectorate series through Broken Binding, I wanted to highlight the artists that I worked with for that, as well as the series itself. That is going to be my underhyped pick for this month. It's not a conflict of interest, by the way. It doesn't matter whether you check the series out or not. That's not how my job works with them. So I'm truly recommending this because I thought it was so fun. And I've mentioned it in a previous video talking about the most underhyped books I picked up this year. I thought this was a blast. It has great dialogue, so many twists and turns. It's got that classic action, adventure, fun, space opera feel. And if you're just in the mood for something that every time I bring it up, I use the same phrase and I'm going to say it again, has the quintessential summer blockbuster feel. It just epitomizes that. I think you'll have a lot of fun with this series. As for the artists, so in all of my other videos this year for announcements, headlines, releases, whenever I've shouted out artists, I have tried so hard to not mention anyone I've worked with, and there are so many artists I haven't worked with, so it's not like that was difficult. But I didn't want to give anything away, but officially, because we finally announced this edition, I can shout out some artists that I've worked with, and both of these individuals happen to be named Ryan, so the Ryans are wonderful. One of our Ryans is actually having his Broken Binding debut through this series, which is very, very exciting. And he has poured so much into this. He continuously astounded us whenever he would send over a sketch, and then the next update we would get, the difference between the sketch and the next update, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much more. And it was wonderful because there's so much passion in trying to bring to life the concepts that we are conveying. It was an absolute pleasure, and not to mention the art is amazing. And one of the best and worst parts of my job is that when they send over possible illustrations and they have the sketches, the amount of times that you're like, these are all so good. Can there be one that's obviously better than the rest? Can they not all be so difficult to choose from? Which, what a problem, I know. But he truly, everything he creates is amazing, even when it's just in its beginning sketch origin forms, and the end results are beautiful. And I can't wait to get the physical copies of these books, because I can't wait to see his work in person. And then our other Ryan, who has worked with Broken Binding before, so I'm sure many of you have seen his work, but the nicest person and the most incredible art. It's all hand done also, and I'm like, there are some people whose talent genuinely not only baffles me, but is almost upsetting. How are you that good? How are you that talented? And the ability to do all this in a pretty short amount of time, too, is astounding. They have done so many different album covers also, which is incredible and so cool. A tiny bit of behind the scenes that I want to mention really fast is that we do supply a lot of reference shots for our artists, so that we're not just spitting a bunch of stuff at them and be like, can you figure out what I'm trying to tell you just from these words? We try to provide visuals as well. Not AI. We get references that are man-made. But regardless, one of the things I kept finding with Ryan, because he's done so many gorgeous pieces for sci-fi art, is that I kept being like, well, I just want to send him his own stuff. And I think that just speaks to how incredibly talented and versatile he is, that just piece after piece after piece that he has done has been phenomenal. I can't recommend that you check out both of these artists enough, because they're both fantastic and they deserve all the support, and I'm so happy to have worked with them. But anyway, that's it for our headlines for July, our releases that are coming out, some announcements. I'll have, as I've said before, all of the relevant information in a pinned comment so that you can check everything out there. And if you'd like to add any other news that you've heard recently, or any other books that are coming out that I didn't mention, of course, feel free to do so. But thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.